Welcome to everyone once again. I am so excited to share this space today with beautiful Jacqueline Byrne, which is a clinical psychotherapist specializing in eating disorder recovery, and obviously great friend, great friend, and partner in crime. And today we are here to discuss the repercussions of long-standing eating disorders, basically. So first of all, welcome, Jacqueline. How have you been?
Thank you, Claudia. It's wonderful to be back. I have been well. I have been doing well, just moving through this cold Sydney winter, and it feels like there's a bit of spring coming into the air now, which is really exciting.
Now I can pick up on your voice, which is not optimal. I've just come out of 7 days of having a flu and a sore throat, so definitely you're not the only one.
Yeah.
But it has been a hot minute since we have talked with each other, and the last months we had a great conversation about self-care tools that we can implement when going through the HA and ED recovery journey. So for all of you that are listening to this right now and you haven't watched those 2 beautiful episodes, just please make sure that you go back and listen to them, because they are packed with juicy informations. But for now, without further ado, let's dive deep into the conversations that we are having today about the long-standing repercussion of having an eating disorder. So, Jacqueline, would you like to go first and just share what really comes to mind?
I think this is such an important conversation to have, because sometimes in focusing in on the detail of the eating disorder and how to find recovery, what to do in recovery, what gets missed is what the costs are in the interim. And longer term eating disorders are considered eating disorders that continue after 2 years. Chronic eating disorders are considered eating disorders that continue after 7 years. And that's 7 years from onset of symptoms, not diagnoses, because often people don't even receive diagnoses or support till several years into their experience, because of not realizing that it really was a problem, or not having resources, or because of shame. And eating disorders are complicated because they intersect with other mental health issues that may have predated the eating disorder. For example, 70% of people that are eventually diagnosed with an eating disorder are likely to have had freestanding anxiety. 40% are likely to have had freestanding depression. There are also high rates of OCD. And another significant category is neurodivergency and personality disorders that might predate the eating disorder. But once somebody has an eating disorder, and this is what we're focusing on today, what are the costs as that takes up root in their life as the years go on with this behavior in play? And even if somebody didn't have any of these other factors prior to the eating disorder, the effect cognitively on the brain of an eating disorder is stronger than any other mental health condition, because of the nature of the behavioral factors of an eating disorder and the interplay of nutrition. Every cell in the body is affected. Every part of our body, how our brain functions, is impacted by the eating disorder physiologically and cognitively, because of repetitive thought, rumination of ruminative thinking, rigidity of thinking. So we then see things like anxiety and depression escalating because of the eating disorder, essentially, because of the nutritional components of what might be playing out. When hormones start to be interrupted, we start to see this playing out in mental health. We also know that when someone is in high stress, so when they're in an eating disorder and they're in a stressed state, their nervous system is in distress. They are going to be experiencing more trauma responses than they would likely otherwise have. So that means if there is predating trauma, which that person may have been responding to perhaps even more functionally before their eating disorder came online, after their eating disorder has taken root, their capacity to respond to trauma in the past, and trauma that occurs from that point on is hugely compromised, and that they will be more traumatized by the same events. We also see an increase in OCD behavior very strongly with eating disorder onset, and memory and cognitive function are hugely impaired. So it really, you and I talk about why recovery is worth investing in and how important early intervention is, or just moving towards giving everything you can to pursuing recovery. We really wanted to highlight today the costs that come with not doing that might not be as obviously fitting in within the understanding of just the eating disorder experience.
I think that it's really important to have the conversation about the long-term repercussion. And I don't want to look at it from a very simplistic point of view, but the way that I see it is a less nutrition, less production of the correct neurotransmitters, more anxiety, and more people are going to be affected by trauma and experiences in life in general. Obviously, as a nutrition and dietetic clinician, for me, the longest repercussions that people with an eating disorder normally have is that the malnutrition and the nutritional deficiencies that can result in the lack of essential nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, and this can definitely negatively impact various bodily functions and also the overall health and our capacity to even keep a job or have a relationship or to function well within the society. Now, the question is, how can we get to this malnutrition? How can we get to this nutritional deficiency? And everyone may be thinking restriction, anorexia nervosa, but that's not it. For example, purging behavior or compensatory behaviors in general, like overtraining, excessive exercise, can prevent the body from absorbing necessary nutrients, and that lead to malnutrition as well. Another big one is binge eating and also eating nutrients poor foods. So people with binge eating disorder, for example, may consume a large quantities of unhealthy foods, which lead to imbalances in essential nutrients and then malnutrition. And I also would like to touch upon something that it's really important to remember, which is the electrolyte imbalance that can that it's something that is not really taken too seriously by people, but can really disrupt someone's well-being and even the capacity to develop muscles, or that can lead to dehydration very quickly. And the last couple of things is definitely bone health and organ dysfunction. Lots of women that present with a long history of eating disorders, they do sometimes show up with osteopenia, osteoporosis from a very young age, even from the age of 19 and 20. So when we talk about long-standing repercussion, we're not looking at someone that is 50 plus, which is way too close to my age right now. But we are even looking at very, very young individuals that have been battling with this disorder for only 5 to 6 years or even less than that. And I'm gonna pause here because there are so many things that I can add on, and I don't want to scare anyone off. But as we mentioned before, it's a conversation that needs to be highlighted. Apart from the mental health repercussions and the nutritional deficiencies, is there anything else that you have seen in clinical practice and you would like to touch upon?
Yes. And I, just to what you just said as well, Clary, I also had that feeling sort of running through this quick fire list of horrific consequences for enduring eating disorders feels almost cruel because nobody's choosing to be in this situation. But one moment that has always haunted me was somebody that I was supporting who said to me she was quite far on in her eating disorder, and she had seen people earlier on in her eating disorder for treatment, and no one had ever told her what the consequences might have been for her eating disorder. They were trying to convince her to recover and convince her to increase her intake, but no one actually spelled out what the risks were. She couldn't remember them doing so. And she was so heartbroken by that and was so deeply filled with maybe what might have been possible if it could have registered exactly what was being compromised and how much change mattered then, what that could have prevented and what she was now suffering through. It really deeply sunk into my cells that day to make sure that no one I speak to is ever not informed, because I think information can be a way of respecting somebody and showing them care and making sure they're fully aware of their circumstances. It's not fear mongering, and it's not implying that, well, now you know better, you should do better, because we very much understand eating disorders are incredibly complicated, and no one's doing this because they think it's the best idea. But I want anyone listening to feel like they were respected enough to be told the full story about their illness and what they were going through.
Actually, if you don't mind me, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because that's exactly what most of the women that come to me are presenting with. They normally come to me past the age of 36 or 38 wanting to have kids, and they feel betrayed by their body. They feel betrayed by the medical professionals that have not told them back in the past. And we're talking about 10 years ago when the education in regards to eating disorders, hypothalamic amenorrhea, and subfertility was really poor to non-existent. And whenever they come to me, they feel that incredible sense of guilt because they cannot become mothers because of the choices that they made in the past, which, as you just beautifully explained, they were not really choices, but they were choices driven by a mental health disorder. So not something that someone was doing willingly, just simply out of fun.
Exactly. And if you present at a local GP clinic and say, well, I'm not getting my period and my skin's breaking out, and you're told, well, go on the pill and that'll protect your bones, and that means you are getting a period and you're okay. And for the next 10 years, you just rinse and repeat that script and stay on the pill. And until you're trying for a baby a decade later, for the first time, realize your natural period isn't returning, and actually you haven't had a real period at all for the last decade. I think you have every right to be very angry about that initial consultation, not raising the question of, well, why aren't you bleeding? And should we investigate this before we band-aid it? And I think these are the stories that you and I hear a lot, where it is really important for women to be fully informed, which isn't an implication of judgment at all. And it is the other issues that come with malnutrition over a long period of time. I'm so grateful you highlighted the different ways that can present, because it isn't always in an underweight body at all. Is really everything to do with brain function, which is every way that we live, everything we do. And whether it's day-to-day memory, the efficiency you have in your workplace, your capacity for stress as well. The stress threshold is part of cognitive function. We do know people that have experienced eating disorders, the longer they experience eating disorders for, are at higher risk of Alzheimer's too, and those really scary degenerative cognitive illnesses, as well as chronic illnesses and immunocompromising disorders will show up because our cell health is compromised. But where I also see it is in relationship health and in social health, because if you're operating at low capacity, you are going to be operating in survival mode and prioritizing whatever it is in your world that allows you to get through, whether that's getting by at work or maintaining a primary relationship. But you probably don't also have enough energy to maintain healthy functioning friendships or feel like you're embedded within a broader community. And so these other quality of life factors they're eroded for the very people that need them the most. When we know that these are the factors of well-being, when we look at longer term life satisfaction and higher levels of happiness, it's connection and relationship, sense of community, sense of purpose that consistently show up for people that have a better time. And it's these areas that are so much harder to invest in and develop if you're in this compromised state ongoingly.
As you unfortunately said, the word getting by, it's really describing the condition of someone that is living with an eating disorder, because there is no energy, there is no available energy to have a menstrual cycle, to move out of a situation that is possibly abusive, to change job, or to even go out and have fun with friends, because after you have exercised or restricted your caloric intake or thought about food 24/7, there is really little space to do anything else. And one more thing that is quite unfortunate when healing from an eating disorder is all the problems that come with the digestive system and the lack of absorption of incredible nutrients that are super important for mental health, obviously, and for energy. And that's something I think that is the cruel part of nature, because let's say, for example, that you decide that you want to stop smoking within a couple of weeks. So you have seen possibly one of the infographics. Within a couple of weeks, your lungs are looking better. Within 6 months, your lungs have basically are the lungs of someone that has never smoked before, unless you have been smoking for more than 50 years consecutively, obviously. But with an eating disorder, it's slightly different, because especially during the first few months, there are so many issues that needs to be surpassed to start feeling better, to get the energy back, to get the menstrual cycle back, and which is why it's so important to actually do it with the support of people that can get what you're going through, so that you don't revert back to all the unhealthful behaviors. And it's I think that the cruelty of healing from an eating disorder is sometimes also needs to be underlined, because when women or people in general decide to finally commit and recover, they are sometimes so taken aback by all the things that may arise, especially within the first couple of months.
Exactly, yes. And it is. When we think about the deprivation that can be in the body, and that the extent of the depletion, which I'd love to hear more about from a nutritional perspective, because the body stores nutrients, right? So it's like your bank, like you've got no bank balance, let alone no like available cash in your spending account. You've got no balance in your savings account either. And that is also very true from a mental health perspective, that people that have eating disorders often are very high functioning, and you might not know it on meeting them. They can get through a meeting at work, they can do the school pickup and no one might notice there's something very dangerous going on. But when you look at all the pieces of the puzzle of life and try to fit them together, the whole picture isn't working, and there's such depletion, and that depletion is accumulative as well, because if this is long-term, friendships, relationships, community, it takes years and years and years. It's about decades. It's about building. And if you've missed out on those 5 years, and then those 10 years, and then those 15 years, there's so much that hasn't been invested in that you can't catch up on quickly. It's not like you can start recovery, and it can make a huge amount of difference quite quickly in many ways. But there's always components to well-being that take time, and relationships are one of those things that can't be rushed.
Absolutely. And the way that I normally say it is that a normal human being that has never experienced an eating disorder wake up in the morning with 5 teaspoons of energy. But if you have been experiencing an eating disorder or other comorbidities, then you wake up every day with 2 teaspoons of energy. And so it's much easier to survive instead of thriving in life in that situation. I really do believe, Jacqueline, the next time that we meet, we should actually talk specifically about how women can find energy in the first stages of the recovery journey, how they can find energy and motivation, because I know that in this live, we have really underlined the reasons why it's so important to take actions right now. It doesn't matter for how long you have been suffering from an eating disorder. It doesn't matter your age, your gender, where you live. It does not really matter. But maybe from next time, we can also focus on, all right, you have decided to commit to the journey. How can we make sure that during the first 3 months, you have the best experience so that you actually have the energy to make the changes that are needed? How does that sound for you?
Amazing. I would love to have that conversation.
Yeah, so we are going to put a positive spin next time. No.
That's right. Stay tuned for part 2. It's an important part 2.
Absolutely. And Jacqueline, it has been an absolute pleasure having you with us today. I'm looking forward to the next conversation next month. So for all of you watching this video today, just watch out for the next episode. Or if you want to binge watch on our past episodes, you're more than free to do so. Just head to our YouTube channel and you're going to find the links. So, Jacqueline, I wish you the most beautiful end of your week, and I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.